I was halfway through making pancakes when my phone buzzed against the marble counter. The smell of vanilla batter filled my kitchen, sunlight streaming through the tall windows of my downtown apartment. My daughter, Lily, sat at the table, legs swinging, humming to herself as she drew with colored pencils. Her laughter, light and carefree, was my favorite sound in the world. When I glanced at the screen, my breath caught. "Mom, we'd like to see you. It's been too long." For a second, I just stared at the message, the words blurring together. It had been 5 years since I'd heard from my parents. 5 years since I'd packed my life into 2 suitcases and promised myself never to look back. They'd made their choice, favoring my brother's family while treating my 6-year-old daughter like a servant, and I'd made mine. Silence. Still, my hands trembled as I picked up my coffee. It was ridiculous how the past could still make me shake. The woman in the reflection of the microwave, polished blouse, sleek hair, steady eyes, didn't look like the same girl who once begged for their approval. But somewhere beneath the composure, a familiar ache pulsed. "Mom, you okay?" Lily asked, her big brown eyes lifting toward me. I forced a smile. "Yeah, baby. Just old ghosts saying hello." I set my cup down, drew in a breath, and whispered under it. Maybe it's finally time to face them. 5 years ago, I wasn't the woman standing in a penthouse kitchen. I was a scared single mother standing on my parents' porch with 2 suitcases and a 6-year-old clinging to my leg. It was raining that night. My divorce papers were still damp from my tears, and the world felt too heavy for me to carry alone. When my mother opened the door, she didn't hug me. She just stepped aside. "You can stay until you get back on your feet," she said, her voice clipped. My father didn't even look up from his newspaper when I walked in. At first, I tried to make it work. I offered to help, to contribute somehow, even though I had no job and no confidence left. But it didn't take long before the balance of kindness shifted, before I realized I wasn't just unwanted, I was tolerated. They adored my brother's kids, twin girls with curls like spun gold and matching dresses that Grandma bought from expensive catalogs. Every morning, they sat at the table waiting for breakfast, while my daughter Lily was told to help set the plates and pour the juice. "She needs to learn responsibility," my mother said once, as Lily carefully placed napkins beside each setting. She was 6. 6. I still remember the day I found her kneeling on the kitchen floor, wiping spilled milk while my nieces giggled and pointed. She looked up at me with wide, wet eyes and whispered, "Grandma says I'm the helper." Something inside me cracked that day. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat by Lily's side and brushed her hair, my chest burning with guilt. I wanted to scream, to confront my parents, but I was too exhausted, too afraid of being homeless again. Then one afternoon, my father told me almost casually, "Maybe if you'd chosen a better husband, you wouldn't be in this mess." That was it. The last straw. I packed her things quietly while Lily napped. On the dresser, I found one of her crayon drawings, our little family, holding hands beneath a bright yellow sun. My mother had crumpled it earlier that week for being messy. I smoothed it out, folded it gently, and tucked it into my bag. As we walked out into the cold evening air, I didn't know where we were going, but I knew one thing for certain. My daughter would never again call herself the helper. The first few months after leaving my parents' house felt like drowning with my eyes open. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in Columbus. The paint on the walls peeled like old paper, and the heater coughed more than it worked, but it was ours. For the first time, Lily and I could breathe without judgment pressing on our backs. I found a job as a receptionist at a local interior design firm. The hours were long, the pay was modest, and most nights I fell asleep beside Lily, still in my work clothes. But being surrounded by color boards, fabric swatches, and the hum of creative energy stirred something I thought I'd lost. One afternoon, while reorganizing the sample room, I started sketching ideas for a client project that had been left half-finished. When my boss, Rebecca, sharp-eyed, mid-40s, elegant in a way that didn't beg attention, saw my sketches, she asked, "You did this?" I panicked. I was just playing around. She smiled. "Don't play small, Emily. You've got an eye for space and feeling. Ever thought about designing? Rebecca became the first person, outside of Lily, who believed in me. She encouraged me to take evening classes at the community college. I drop Lily at night care, study until midnight then. Come home to kiss her sleeping forehead before collapsing into bed. It was brutal, but every lesson, every sketch, every tired morning pushed me closer to the woman I wanted to become. A year later, I designed my first living room under Rebecca's supervision. The client loved it so much, she referred 2 friends. Slowly, I built a small portfolio and soon a reputation. I remember the first time I deposited a check that had my company name on it, Lily and Company. Interiors. I sat in my old car and cried so hard my mascara ran down my cheeks. It wasn't just pride. It was freedom, raw and fragile, but mine. As the years passed, my business grew through word of mouth. I learned to negotiate contracts, lead teams, and say no without flinching. My daughter grew alongside my success, strong, confident, no trace of the quiet girl who once scrubbed floors at her grandparents' house. I kept our progress private. My parents occasionally texted around holidays, but I replied politely and vaguely. "We're doing fine," I'd write, leaving out the part about the downtown office, the 4 employees, or the local magazine that featured my designs last spring. Sometimes I'd catch myself scrolling through their Facebook posts, photos of family dinners, grandkids' birthdays, smiling faces that used to make my heart ache. But now, the ache was fading, replaced by a quiet, certain peace. I didn't need them to see me anymore. Or, at least, I thought I didn't, until the message came last week. Until the ghosts I'd buried decided to knock again. When I finally agreed to see my parents, I told myself it was for closure, not forgiveness. They'd asked to meet at my place, not realizing what that meant now. That morning, I arrived early at my office. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, warming the cream walls and gold accents I'd personally chosen. Framed design magazines featuring my projects hung neatly behind my desk. The space smelled faintly of sandalwood and fresh lilies, Lily's favorite flower. My assistant, Claire, buzzed in. "Your parents are here, Ms. Hayes." For a moment, my breath caught. Ms. Hayes. It still made me proud hearing it. "Send them in," I said, my voice calm, measured. When my parents stepped through the glass doors, they froze. My father's eyes darted across the room, taking in the elegant furniture, the artwork, the small brass plaque near the entrance that read Lily and Company. Interiors, founder and creative director, Emily Hayes. My mother's hand went to her chest. "Emily, this is your office?" "Yes," I said evenly, standing to greet them. "Welcome." They sat across from me, visibly disoriented. I poured them coffee myself, an old habit I didn't mind reclaiming on my terms. "We didn't realize you'd done so well," my father said, his voice thick with something between pride and guilt. "I figured," I replied softly. "I don't post much online." The silence that followed was heavy. My mother stared at the framed photo on my desk, Lily in her graduation gown, grinning from ear to ear. "She's beautiful," my mother whispered. "She looks happy." "She is," I said. "She's thriving. Studying architecture now, actually. I guess creativity runs in the family." My father cleared his throat. "Emily, we wanted to apologize. We were hard on you. Things were different back then." I almost laughed. Different was an easy word for cruelty. My tone stayed calm, but my eyes didn't waver. "You made a 6-year-old feel like she wasn't worthy of being your granddaughter. You made her serve while others Saturday." My mother looked down, blinking fast. My father shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't mean to." "But you did," I interrupted gently. "You made me believe that love had to be earned through silence and obedience. And you made my daughter think she was less than her cousins." My mother's voice cracked. "We were wrong, Emily. We see that now. We just want a chance to make things right." I stood and walked to the window, the city skyline glimmering in the distance. My reflection in the glass was calm, almost detached. "When I left your house, I had nothing," I said quietly. You told me I'd never make it without your help. But every brick in this office, every dollar I earned, came from the same girl you dismissed. I turned to face them. You taught my daughter to serve others. I taught her to stand tall. My father's eyes welled with tears. My mother's lip trembled. I'm not here to punish you, I added. But I need you to understand. I became who I am because I refused to let your definition of me stick. The room went silent, heavy with realization. Finally, my mother whispered, Emily, we're proud of you. I smiled faintly. Thank you. But pride isn't what I needed from you back then. They nodded, their faces pale, unsure of how to bridge years of distance. When they left that day, I walked them to the door myself. My father turned back once, eyes filled with something I'd never seen before, humility. And for the first time in my life, I didn't crave their approval. I already had everything I needed. A week after that meeting, I got another message, this time from my mother. Your father isn't well. We could use some help. I sat at my desk, rereading it several times. The old me would have rushed to their side without hesitation, desperate to prove I was still the dutiful daughter. But the woman I'd become, steady, grounded, no longer seeking permission to exist, paused before replying. That evening, I called them and invited them over for dinner. Not to my office this time, but to our home. A soft evening breeze swept through the open windows, carrying the scent of roasted herbs and lemon from the kitchen. Lily, now 18, set the table, her movements confident and easy. When my parents arrived, they looked uncertain, almost nervous. My father walked with a cane now. Time had softened the edges of his pride. My mother's eyes darted around the elegant open space, stopping at the framed drawing on the wall, the one she had once crumpled. Lily's childhood art, restored and glowing in its golden frame. Dinner was quiet at first, filled with small talk and clinking silverware. But after dessert, I leaned back and met their eyes. I got your message, I said gently. And I want to help. But things have to be different this time. My mother nodded quickly. Of course, anything. I folded my hands on the table. If I'm going to be part of your lives again, you'll have to accept Lily as more than an obligation. She's not the little girl you used to send for tea and towels. She's an adult with her own dreams. I won't expose her to anything that makes her feel small again. My father looked down. You're right. We owe her an apology. There's more, I continued, voice steady but warm. If I help you financially or otherwise, it'll be through clear boundaries. No guilt, no comparisons, no taking sides. You have to start showing up for people because you love them, not because they serve a purpose. They both nodded, eyes glassy. And for you, Mom, I added softly, you need to stop pretending emotions make you weak. You raised us to compete for affection, not to share it. That ends now. Tears finally broke down her cheeks. I didn't know any other way, she whispered. I know, I said. That's why I'm giving you one. Lily reached over then and placed her hand on her grandmother's. We all get to start over, right? She asked. That small gesture, the very child they'd once diminished offering them grace, seemed to shatter something in the room. My father sobbed quietly, my mother held Lily's hand, and I felt the air shift. Not forgiveness exactly, but the first breath of something close to it. I stood and refilled their teacups, smiling softly. If we're going to rebuild, it'll be on honesty and respect. Those are my conditions. This time, they both nodded, not out of fear or pride, but understanding. The weeks that followed were quiet, but healing in a way I hadn't expected. My parents started visiting every Sunday, no grand gestures, no forced conversations. Just presence. My mother would bring homemade pie. My father would sit on the porch with Lily, listening to her plans for architecture school. There was an awkwardness at first, but it softened into something surprisingly tender. One evening, I overheard my mother telling Lily, "You remind me of your mother when she was your age, brave, stubborn, full of ideas." I stood in the hallway, unseen, and let the words sink in. It was the first time I'd ever heard her say brave instead of difficult. Lily smiled and replied, Mom says being brave just means loving yourself out loud. I had to step away to wipe my eyes. One Saturday, while cleaning the living room, I noticed the framed drawing, the one that had traveled with me from my parents' house to every apartment, every office, every stage of my life. The edges were still wrinkled, the crayon lines faint but bright with memory. I traced the outline of our stick-figure family beneath that yellow sun. It used to represent everything I'd lost. Now it reminded me of everything I'd built. That night, we all sat together for dinner. 3 generations, laughter replacing the silence that once haunted us. My father lifted his glass of lemonade and said, "To new beginnings." I met his gaze and smiled. To learning that love doesn't have favorites. Lily squeezed my hand under the table. For the first time in decades, I felt the past loosen its grip. The anger had faded, replaced by a quiet kind of peace, the kind that doesn't erase the pain, but honors it. After everyone left that night, I stood by the window, city lights twinkling like a promise in the distance. I thought of the woman I'd become, the girl who walked away with nothing but hope, who built a life out of pieces, who taught her daughter the value of self-worth. I looked at the drawing one last time, whispered a thank you to the universe, and turned off the lights. Because some stories don't end with revenge. They end with reclamation. They once made my daughter serve to feel small. Now she stands beside me, and the world serves her worth.